I met Adriana at her office in the museum. This is right in front of the Washington Memorial, one of the most iconic monuments here in Washington, D.C.
Looking at a document, it can be fascinating, and that's a part of history. But looking at art, it evokes so many emotions. I think it could take you on a journey and tell you things about history or about an issue. I know you've had exhibits that talk about homelessness, really important issues here. Can you talk about that and the difference between history and art and bringing them together and getting that message across?
So let me give you a great example that I think that will answer your question. I recently created an exhibition titled No Ocean Between Us. And it's pretty much an exhibition that focuses on the Asian diaspora to Latin America and the Caribbean. That uses the objects, the art pieces, as sources of the history of these migrations. So the exhibition frames these artworks as living documents of the migration, how these migrations happened after the abolition of slavery in the Caribbean and in Brazil, Argentina, Panama, and so on, and in which conditions these workers came to the Americas and how the art that they are producing now and several generations are part of history and tells how these migrations took place, what they endured, how they assimilated or not to the culture, what the challenges, if they had suffered racial persecutions or things like that. So what we wanted to tell with this exhibition was a history of a difficult history that perhaps hasn't been told in schools, at least in Latin America, at the level that it should be taught. And everything is done through art, through contemporary art, installations, prints, sculptures, and painting.
So the pressure of that, because it's such an important message, putting together and getting it just right, I mean, it must keep you up at night. I mean, talk to me about your job, and then what's the payoff? I mean, as people walk through?
Well, in the work that we do here, this museum is really particular, and I think really different from any other museum, because we are part of the Organization of American States, and every single exhibition focus on the pillars of the organization. We deal with democracy, human rights, development, and security, and everything that encompasses. So the exhibition that we have now on view, it's an exhibition about the pandemic and an artist that reinvented himself, and it talks about his vulnerabilities and how he was very resilient and reinventing himself in a moment in which he didn't even have equipment. So everything that we do is permeated by that. So we go further than the art itself, and we use the artwork to tell us those histories, to talk about those issues. Perhaps in better ways than words, sometimes that is difficult to put in words. So we want people to experience that. And the payoff of all of this is when you see people coming in the museum and saying, oh, I get it, or I didn't know that happened, or I didn't know that, for example, that the second largest population of Japanese people lives in Brazil, for example. So those things, when you hear that, when you see people like, oh, this is the message, I can relate to that, I come from that, that's what we want people to experience when they come in the museum.
Adriana has a master's in history and art history from George Mason University.
And it's knowledge too. I mean, it's education in the sense that I think especially here, given the fact that it's in Washington D.C., the U.S. has this belief system that we're a melting pot, and I think it probably surprises people to see that East meets West. That I know you have Japanese artists as well. Just talk to us about that. I mean, in terms of opening up the Americas in terms of knowledge to people who may not be all that familiar.
Yeah. So and again, that's what makes us really particular in Washington D.C. in this city of museums. People come here to look at something that is really, really different. And in that sense, for example, our collection has a particular facet, that I will say, of artists, Japanese Brazilian artists, for example. Either artists that migrated directly to Brazil or second and third generations. And the Organization of the American States collected those pieces even before the museum existed. Those pieces are from the 1960s. There was already, back in the day, a need to show those issues. Who we are, where we come from, how our population is formed. And that happens as well with Afro-Caribbean artists, for example, or Chinese artists even, or artists from Indonesia that migrated to the Caribbean. So we are this, let's say, this beacon that is able to show those stories and tell stories about Latin America in DC.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about art, but I know your other fascination and love is history. So give us the history, because it did start with a collection before it started as a museum. So how did we get to this point today?
Well, so the predecessor of the OAS, the Pan American Union, had a unit called the Intellectual Cooperation Unit. And that unit actually hired a Mexican director. Her name was Concha Romero James. And she began collecting press clippings from the different artists of the Americas, exhibitions, catalogs, and she created, let's say, it's like some stacks of information. That program later grew in what it was the Division of Visual Arts. And at that point, they hired this Cuban art critic, Jose Gomez Sicri, that came to the United States because he created the first exhibition of Cuban art at MoMA. And he was hired in 1948. And then later on, he replaced Concha Romero James, and he created a very dynamic and disciplined exhibition program at the OAS main building. And he will travel throughout the region, finding young Latin American artists who had the very first exhibition here at the OAS. Even in late 1940s, he donated the very first piece of that entered to the permanent collection, a piece of Cândido Portinari. He's a Brazilian artist that made the murals at the Hispanic division at the Library of Congress. And that's when he acquired that piece that he donated to the museum. And in 1957, the OAS granted him a small purchase fund. And he will buy from those exhibitions, those were monthly exhibitions, he will buy a piece of those artists that now we consider the main figures of Latin American art. Such as, let's say, Alejandro Obregón from Colombia, also José Luis Cuevas from Mexico, to give you just two names. And that's how the collection was formed. Then some institutions donated pieces, and little by little, we became the very first museum of Latin American art in the United States. that focus on young artists in the region, and that's what makes our collection so unique, because we collected those pieces when these artists were really young. So the works that we have are really special. And he also kept growing the archives. So right now, the Art Museum of the Americas has one of the most important sources of information about Latin American art, in between press clippings, brochures, correspondence with José Gómez Sicre. And we also have a collection of 2,000 pieces that focus on the region. The museum opened to the public at the building where we are right now in 1976, with the aim of only showing the permanent collection, and then that changed, and now we are constantly changing exhibitions, including exhibitions of our permanent collection.
In the permanent collection of the museum, you can see the work of multiple Latin American artists. Here's a look at Return from the Fair from Candido Portinari. Over here is Araucanian Toys from Pablo Burchard. There's also Composition 20 from Elsa Gramco. And this work is Man Contemplating the Moon from Rufino Tamayo.
What's great is we were just leaving the exhibit where we were chatting 40 days and 40 nights about the quarantine. And we're going to be heading downstairs. You've got a new exhibit that just opened. Talk to us a little bit about where we're headed.
So this exhibition is titled Mapping the Layers, Julio Valdez, which showcases the work of a Dominican artist that is based in New York City and Washington, D.C. So the exhibition, it's pretty much based on his experience as his own migration from Dominican Republic to the United States.
Let's walk inside. So you've got some really intriguing pieces here. Any that just jump out at you that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I want to mention this piece. So these pieces in this gallery are part of like the latest work that the artist has been producing. This particular one is a piece that is on loan from the D.C. Commission of the Arts and Humanities, and they were really kind in let us use this piece, and also we wanted to highlight how this artist is local. He works in the D.C. area and is part of the different institutions.
This one's fascinating too. What can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, so actually this particular piece was part of the Venice Biennale in 2019. So it was there, it represented Dominican Republic in the Biennale.
This is one of the best kept secrets in all of Washington. I mean, this is a city just flush with museums. Talk to me about that and about being in a city which celebrates art.
So it is amazing, and actually we are always wondering like how people can learn about us, how people can find us. And over the years, I have found that we have our audience, Washingtonians that know that we are here, that come to our openings, that are really familiar with what we are doing. I wish more people will come through our doors, and we are working on it. And I hope that people who will see this will like come and adventure here. But what we offer is so unique. Our exhibitions are just like these intimate exhibitions that you can experience, learn about the Americas, and learn about Latin American art.
The museum features the work of Wendy Nannen, born in Trinidad and Tobago in 1955. Nannen is the first Indo-Trinidadian and among the first Caribbean women artists to have a long and sustained professional career.
So many people look back at the pandemic as like the worst experience in their lives, and clearly it is. But in some respects, is it something that you embrace now? You say, you know, it changed me. In some ways, it made us stronger. I mean, how do you look at it?
I think that in our case, and I'm talking on behalf of my team, we know, I mean, we know that it was very hard and everything that was happening in the world was difficult, but I think that as the entire world did, we managed to, with tons of resilience and tons of reinvention, we managed to put the museum out there and do things that we didn't even know that we could do. And when we reopened the museum last year, July 5th, we started to see that our audiences were growing, that more people was coming in the museum, that we had people online and people here just enjoying the museum, and we realized like, okay, I guess like having this dual programming and interacting with people and reinventing ourselves like virtually and having the space open works. And if we hadn't had that experience, I think that reinvention wouldn't happen like it did for us.
Do you think that it's changed your thinking about a museum and how to put things together, or is it still a standalone? You've got social media where you put things over here and the collection here.
I think they go together, but they are separate entities. And what I have learned doing the virtual programming is that maybe sometimes at the museum also people wanted to have like more personal experience with the works. And I think that our space, we have a small space that is not daunting, that offers you like that one-on-one relationship with the piece. And I think that's something that we want to strive and we want to keep going and offering that experience. But also experiencing the art through social media and the screen. It's a different experience, but it's not less important. And perhaps not everyone has the opportunity to go to the museum for X or Y reason. And it's important to offer those people things virtually and keep doing it. For us, it's a tool to reach beyond our Washington D.C. audiences. But I think they are different experiences. Perhaps you could experiment more with the in-person exhibition if you want to do something with technology. But for now, in my opinion, I think that they are different experiences.
I want to ask you what that day was like when you first started to come back here after being away. The sense of joy that you must have had to be back in your element. Describe for us what that was like.
It was so refreshing. It was so refreshing. The very first day that we came for installation, and actually it was an installation that took us a while to do, was the Ocean Between Us exhibition, and it was a long and very disciplined and complex installation, but we were just in our element. We were enjoying each of the pieces, discussing where we were going to install them, just like reading the pieces, reading the exhibition, and it was just amazing.
And then watching people come back in.
Oh, that was the best. That was the best. And see our numbers just like going up, and people interacting with the exhibition. And then we were covered by the Washington Post. So that's when you see like, oh, we are doing something right. But also our very first virtual exhibition, it was covered by the Washington Post. That is the exhibition that we have today on view. This exhibition, when it took place virtually, it was covered by the Washington Post. And at that moment, we were like, okay, we're doing something right if our very first virtual exhibition is covered by the Washington Post.
One final question. You mentioned babies. I'm one of 8 kids, and my mom always said she loved her kids equally. And I know that's not true. She had favorites. You must have favorites in here. Or are you one of those agnostics? No, I love all the work we have here, And is that a tough question to ask?
That's a very tough question because I always say, oh, that's my favorite. Oh, that's my favorite. And our exhibition coordinator said one day to me, just like, stop doing it, that's your favorite. All of them are your favorite. But I do have favorites. So actually, Manabumabe, a Japanese-Brazilian artist that is really important in our collection, I will say that he is my favorite artist in the OAS permanent collection.
Well, you came clean. I
Yeah.
thought for sure you were going to say, no, I love them all. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation.
You're welcome.